Welcome to ClearRound. Log on to clearround.dev for more interview-calibrated questions. Let's discuss a React interview question that even experienced developers often struggle with. This isn't about hooks syntax. It isn't about dependency arrays. And it isn't about common React best practices. This question tests whether you understand how React actually works internally. Here's the situation. You have a child component wrapped with React.memo. All of its props are referentially equal. There are no state updates inside the child component. And yet, the child still renders again. You see the render log, but nothing in the UI changes. So the question is, why can a memoized child component still render, even when all of its props are equal and no state updates occur inside it? To answer this correctly, you need to understand how React's fiber architecture works and the difference between the render phase and the commit phase. Here's the interview question. You have a child component wrapped with React.memo. All of its props are referentially equal. There are no state updates inside the child component. Yet, the child component still renders again. Which of the following best explains this behavior? Option 1. React.memo only works when the parent component does not re-render. Option 2. React may still render the child during the render phase, but bailout before the commit phase. Option 3. React.memo performs a shallow comparison only in production builds. Option 4. Use memo does not guarantee referential equality across renders. Pause the video and think about the correct answer. The correct answer is option 2. React may still render the child during the render phase, but bailout before the commit phase. This sounds subtle, but it's extremely important. Most developers assume that if a component renders, React must be updating the DOM. That assumption is wrong. In React, rendering and committing are two different phases. Rendering is the process where React calls your component functions and builds a new internal tree. Committing is the phase where React actually applies changes to the DOM and runs effects. React.memo can prevent unnecessary work in the commit phase, but does not guarantee that your component function will never be called. So even when props are equal, React may still run the render logic. Compare the result with the previous tree and decide that nothing needs to change on screen. That's why you can see a render log, even though the UI stays exactly the same. This behavior is intentional, and it's a direct consequence of how React's fiber architecture works. Short beat ones. To really understand why React does this, we need to look at what happens during the render phase and how fiber enables interruption and scheduling. To understand this behavior, we need to talk about React Fiber. Fiber is React's internal architecture that allows rendering work to be paused, resumed, or even discarded. When a state update happens, React does not immediately update the DOM. Instead, it starts a new render pass. During this render phase, React walks the component tree and calls component functions to build a new fiber tree. This work is interruptible. React can pause rendering, switch to a higher priority update, or restart the render entirely. Because of this, React cannot assume that a component function will only run when the UI actually changes. Even for memoized components, React may still render them. To determine whether their output can be reused only after the render phase completes. Does React compare the new fiber tree with the previous one? If it sees that nothing has changed, React bails out. No DOM updates, no layout work, no effects rerunning. So React.memo works by preventing unnecessary commits, not by skipping the render phase entirely. This design allows React to stay responsive, prioritize important updates, and support concurrent rendering. This is why render logs can appear, even when the UI remains unchanged. In interviews, the key insight is this. Rendering does not mean committing, and memoization does not mean a component function will never run again. Questions like this are designed to test how deeply you understand React, not just how often you've used it. If you want to practice more interview-level React questions, that focus on internals, edge cases, and real screening scenarios. Head over to ClearRound.dev. You'll find hundreds of carefully curated MCQs that help you build the right mental models.